mind taking a Sunday and just kind of letting the people know where you are. And some of you may have been there when that happened back in May of 2008. And some, which made it pretty tender, pretty emotional. Some of what I'm talking about today is out of that message. Some of it will not be, because I spent several minutes in the message because I felt it was the elephant in the room that needed to be talked about. And I spent probably maybe 15 to 20 minutes of the total message dealing with the subject of suicide, especially loss by suicide. And because I felt like, I needed to say it. I felt like folks need to hear it because it's something that we don't ever talk about. And yet it's something that 20% of us, it strikes our lives and with a loved one. So a lot of today's is, I guess, some rehashing of loss and looking at loss together. So in a minute, I'm going to get to Job chapter 1. So you may want to turn there to Job chapter 1. I think I can begin by saying that looking back over, I'll be 72 tomorrow. Just remember that. Yeah, 72. Right now, I feel like 108. But I'm hoping after we get this figured out, I feel like 42. So we'll see. But with this much life experience behind me, it's easy for me to say that loss is one of the biggest problems of life. It's just there, which leads me to this statement that I want you to see with me. This is not our usual perspective, but it's important to know this is how life should happen when we experience loss as believers. We should realize that life is often, not always, but I think often, looking back over my journey, after the I guess the intense grief from loss, after whatever that was, weeks or months, whatever the case may be, looking back, the loss became the best opportunity for Lynn and I to make choices about how we were going to respond and what we were going to let God do through the loss, which led me to write this. Loss is often, maybe not always, but I think often, the single most important catalyst that God uses to grow us in our spiritual maturity. Again, if we let it. But I know loss, especially tragic loss, never leaves you where it found you. Never. So it's loss is never easy. It's never fun. My wife tells me that that loss is kind of like having a baby. It's neither easy nor fun. Okay, but the end product is wonderful until they grow up. Whatever the case may be. But I really believe, and having been a Christian for many years, and having been a Christian leader for many years, and seen my own journey and watched the journey of my family who have had different responses to the loss. Okay, I can only primarily speak for me and Linda and how God has used it in our journey, and would wish that all of the adult children had a similar response, but have not. And everyone has to, everyone will respond to loss. The issue is we choose how to respond. And that will make all the difference in how we view life moving forward. I believe, at least from my own personal experience, that life should sharpen and strengthen our spiritual journey. It should not in any way, form, or fashion, in time, maybe a pause. There might even be a dip, but in time, it really should become an opportunity for increased trust and increased faith and a stronger journey and a stronger witness for Christ, if we respond well in it. We made a decision not just to live through it or just to endure it, get through, but really to try to learn from it and to use our experience to help others. Swindoll, who's always been one of my favorite writers, he said, it's easy to miss the things God has to teach us because we cannot imagine Him being involved in the grief or disappointment or heartache brought on by the loss of someone or something dear to us. But some of His choicest deliveries come through the back doors of our lives. These unanticipated setbacks are sprung on us, and often we're not ready to take them on in the particular package in which God delivers them. Therefore, it's easy to miss them. And he's right. It is easy to miss them. So I'm going to make 3 observations about loss. The first one is going to be loss is a fact of life. We spent the day with our 20-month-year-old granddaughter yesterday. We were at their house, and she's got this jewelry set. And I forbid everybody to take pictures because here I am playing with my granddaughter at this game, and you put on earrings, you put on a tiara, you put on a necklace, you put on a bracelet, and we'll go around my arm, and I'm just draped out and looking absurdly silly. And they're in 4 or 5 different colors. Well, she's 20 months old, and things are lost rather quickly, or they're in a different toy box. Okay, and so just about in there were 4 different colors of a ring, of a bracelet, of a necklace, and I don't think we had a complete set of anything. And they've just got the game for her, and yet there was some pieces, and she is already you can just kind of tell she's very meticulous and very detail oriented, which will be a blessing and a curse for her. And she does have 3 or 4 different toy chests, which are overloaded. And you're trying to find an earring that's that big, okay, and a bracelet that that's smaller than a watch. So we're in her room that has 1 big toy box, and then there's the front room that has 2 more. And when we come, we don't have matching earrings, and she's looking for the lost earring. I just watched her. I thought, you know what? I'm going to talk about loss tomorrow, and I've never stopped to think that loss begins early in life. It begins really early. Maybe for a child not being able to find a toy, but maybe when they get a little bit older and they have friends in the neighborhood or friends at school, and that other family gets relocated and now they moved away, and the relationship is no longer there. But this business of loss is universal. No one escapes it. Christian, non-Christian, old, young, child. Preschoolers, just no one gets away from it. No one is exempt. Everybody is impacted. The issue is not, are we going to experience loss, but how much loss are we going to experience, and what kinds of loss are we going to experience? And because it's definitely going to come into our journey. The greater the loss, I want to say this up front because it's true, the greater the loss, the greater the suffering. The greater the suffering. And for most of us in the room, and I'll probably repeat this to the end, I have this prophetic word for you, which is painful and not encouraging. And that's this. In all probability, your and my greatest losses are ahead. A mate, a child, an adult child, retirement, loss of the income and the relationships, So many different ways, but our greatest losses are ahead. And I'm hoping that you're going to be able to take a nugget or two from today, because the greatest seasons of loss are in front for most of us in the room, and perhaps this will better prepare you and me for those losses to come. Generally speaking, I think loss falls into two categories. One much easier than the other, one more difficult than the other, and that's the loss of people. The loss of people through the loss of relationship. That could be the loss of relationship from changing jobs, loss of relationships from relocating, loss of relationships from dementia that comes into a loved one and no longer to carry on the relationship they had before, loss of relationship as a result of a marriage ending in the separation and divorce. So many loss as a result of your self-move. I mean, so many different ways to lose connection and relationships with people. And those impact us. Looking back, I only served as an engineer for a season, then another church, and then here for many years, and now retired. Looking back, I don't miss the work. I miss the people of the work. It's the relationships that you miss. And, people that you used to see, every day, 5 days a week, what have you, hardly ever see them anymore. And that's a loss. That's an adjustment, especially those that that you worked with and saw on a day by day basis. And then there's the loss, not just of people, which I think is the harder loss, is the loss of possessions. The loss of possessions, especially here, not so much perhaps in Central Florida, but on the coast. But I think of folks in the west, in the West. And think of what happened in Kentucky, and you just look between natural disasters or other disasters like fire and tornadoes and floods and all of those things that happen, and everything people owned and accumulated all their lives, even if they were really lived in poverty, is gone. And the loss of that, the devastation of everything you've worked for all of your lives is gone, and you've lost it, and some of it is not recoverable, especially if it's pictures and family pictures and that kind of stuff. And it's painful. I talked last week, I think, or week before last, about what happens when the dream dies. That's part of the possessions that we hold on to, and then we lose that dream and we lose a sense of hope. Sometimes we lose a job simply because of cutbacks. Sometimes we weren't qualified for the job and we get let go. Sometimes we lose a job because we get an opportunity for another one. But all of those are still losses that we experience in life. And probably two others that are more devastating is loss of health, and then loss of the security that finances give to us. If we invested maybe in a business venture and it went south, and that which you have saved for, perhaps for family and for retirement years, that nest egg or whatever you want to call it, it's gone. And the security that would come from that is gone. So there's loss of people, there's loss of possessions, and we don't often think a lot, but Jesus lost his dad. We don't know exactly when. Pretty sure before age 12, when we have an occurrence of him in the temple with his mom and the siblings around. So it appears that Joseph had passed away prior to him being 12. We don't know exactly when, in that 10 to 12 years as a child, but he lost his dad, and then he lost Lazarus, who was probably one of his best friends. Yes, he did resurrect. Maybe a better word is resuscitate Lazarus, but eventually he knew Lazarus would die again. So he experienced some loss, and he wept over those particular losses. So just loss is a fact of life. Just expect it, know it's coming. It knows your address, it knows your email address, it knows everything about you, and it'll find you, and it'll happen. You'll get that text, you'll get that phone call, you'll get that knock on the door. All of us will. All of us will. Secondly, loss comes in many forms. Many forms. And there's probably no better study of anyone who was hit with some of the most incredible, instantaneous, unimaginable losses than the Old Testament patriarch Job. So turn back to Job chapter 1, and let's look at Job for just a few minutes, and let's see what Job. Let's start with what Job had, and see what it came. I'm going to begin reading in chapter 1, verse 1. There was a man in the land of Uz. That's probably eastern side of the Jordan in all probability. Job was probably a contemporary with some of the patriarchs. I'm not sure if he would go all the way back to Abraham, but somewhere in Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, somewhere in that area is when Job would have been on the scene there. And it says whose name was Job, and that man was. This is a pretty stellar resume. So let me read it. Who was blameless, upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. That's a big family, I think. Okay, we couldn't manage the 4. Okay, so I'm not sure about this many. He had 7,000 sheep. That's a lot of stink. 3,000 camels, more stink. 500 yoke of oxen, almost intolerable stink. And 500 she-asses. That's what's in my translation. I didn't make that up. She-asses. Okay. She-asses. It'll register in a minute. Okay. And very many servants. And listen, so that this man was the greatest. One of them, the idea there is prosperous, one of the most prosperous of all the people of the East. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each on his day, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. Family got together a lot, which was normal in that culture. And when the days of the feast had run their course, Job would send and sanctify them, and he would rise up early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number and all. This is, he loved his family, loved his kids, prays for his kids, sacrifices for his kids. For Job said, it is maybe that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus Job did continuously. Now, let me capsule all that. When you look at what's been said about him, and you look, he has spiritual wealth, family wealth, material wealth, social wealth. I mean, he has it said of him that he is the greatest among all people. All right, let me read on. Now, when that day, when the sons of God, these are angelic beings, came to present themselves before the Lord, having some kind of access to heaven, and Satan also came along with them. So Satan, formerly Lucifer, having access to heaven, also among them, said, the Lord said to Satan, where have you come? And Satan answered to the Lord, I'm coming from going to and fro the whole earth. Satan goes about like to and fro throughout the whole earth. He goes about 1 John 5:8 to looking to and fro of the earth. Adversary looking for believers to harass and intimidate and to minimize their testimony effectiveness for Christ, which is what happens here. I've been going to and fro on the earth, from walking up and down on it. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? Listen, this is God's testimony of Job. There is none like him on the earth. Wow. A blameless and upright man who fears God, turns away from evil. Then Satan answered the Lord, does Job fear God for naught? I mean, he only serves for you because you're good to him. That's the inference. Has not put a hedge about him and his house and all that he has on every side? Sure, he's faithful to you. Sure, he loves you. Sure, he follows you. Sure, he obeys you because you take care of him. That's the inference, okay? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But put forth thy hand now and touch all that he has, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all of that he has is in your power. Only upon himself do not put forth your hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. So that's everything that he has. And we get a little bit of backdrop of kind of what's going on here. And then beginning in verse 13, this is what he lost. This is one of the worst catastrophes that I have ever heard of in my entire life. Now, there was a day. There are those days, aren't there? There was a day. Life happened, and it does. When the sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine. Now, the Pharisee in me wants to say that was the problem. But I don't want to be a Pharisee because it really wasn't the problem that they were having a family party. Okay? In the eldest brother's house. And there came a messenger to Job and said, the oxen, 500 of them, were plowing, and the she-asses, 500 of them, were feeding beside them. And the Sabaean, this was an enemy, okay, nearby enemy, fell upon them and took them and slew the servants. They took all the possession of those two animals and killed the servants with the edge of the swords, and I have alone escaped to tell you. That's bad news. Verse 16, while he was yet speaking, there came another. And he said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep, 7,000 sheep, and the servants, and consumed them. And I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was yet speaking, I think after the second one, I was said, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. While he was yet speaking, there was another and said, the Chaldeans, this is the Babylonians from the north, formed 3 companies and made a raid upon the camels. I think there were several thousand of those, and took them and slew the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Verse 18, while he was yet speaking, there came another. This is getting real up close and personal now. You took my possession. You took my stuff. Then he says, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And behold, a great wind, tornado, hurricane, I don't know what all is involved in it, came across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young people, and they are dead. And I alone have escaped to tell you. So everything he had, he's lost. People, possessions, everything. But it's not done. It's not done. Let's read on chapter 2. And again, there was a day when the sons of God, here we're going back to the angels, fallen angels, came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said to Satan, where have you come? Satan answered the Lord, from going to and fro on the earth and from walking up and down on it, as he continues to do. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There's none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, fears God and turns away from evil. He still holds fast his integrity, although you moved me against him to destroy him without cause. Then Satan answered the Lord, skin for skin. All that a man has, he will give for his life. But put forth thy hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, he is in your power. Only spare his life. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord and afflicted Job with loathsome sores from the sole of his feet to the crown of his head, from top to bottom. Probably some form of black leprosy, a disease known as elephantiasis. Yeah. And he took up the broken pottery to scrape and to itch himself as he sat among the ashes. So he's lost everything. I mean, what else is to be lost? Everything is gone. I thought, you know what? The next time I think life has treated me unfairly, I'm going to go back and read Job 1. Not anywhere near that bad. So how did Job respond? How did he respond? Well, let me begin with what I think is the most common response, that and Mrs. Job had that one. Okay? Mrs. Job had that one. So we're back to chapter 2. Then his wife. You got to remember everything I just read. Then his wife. Okay, how'd you like to be married to this woman? Okay. Then his wife said to him, do you still hold fast your integrity? In other words, do you still hold on to your faith? Do you still hold on to righteousness and living a godly life makes a difference? Do you still hold on to that? Now, what's not said is even more disturbing. Have you lost your stupid mind? Why in the world would you continue to trust in a God who treats you this way? Curse God. Curse God and die. Kill yourself. Kill yourself. But he said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women would speak. Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? In all of this, Job did not sin with his lips. Never once did he charge or accuse God. Mrs. Job had the common response of, you can't trust God. He's not good. And you need to curse God. You need to die. And I watched in my journal, the common response is shock, panic, denial, anger, betrayal, disillusionment, not dealt with, depression, resentment, and bitterness. Now, a couple of questions. Is there any evidence in Job 1 and 2 that Job deserved any of this? No. No, not at all. Is there any evidence, again, you probably have to read the rest of the book, but I can just tell you there isn't, that Job ever knew why this side of heaven all of this happened to him? No. No explanation. No explanation. But Mrs. Job takes the more common response, and which is, and I want to say this carefully here, which she took God's good gifts and began to see them as her rights. I deserve this. I deserve this. That's always a danger for all of us. And I think part of it is she wanted Mr. Job to join her in her bitterness and anger. So that was her response, which I think is the all too common response. And then there is, I probably should have said, in that poor, wrong response, I call that the why zone. Why? Why me? Why now? Why my kids? Why my property? Why not me? Why not my wife? Why not? Why? And it's easy to get there. Now, I don't want to defend Job, because if you read through all 42 chapters, which is difficult reading, he asked at least 75 questions. So that's not to say he didn't have some why issues as he went through this. I think that he did. But the rare response, which is where he got to, at least in time, was the response that brings, I think, growth. And I call that kind of the who, what zone. Who's in control and what can I learn? That's the question. Who is in control and what can I learn? And I think this is kind of pretty much where hope begins. That's where hope begins. So what was Job's response? What did Job do? What should we do when loss happens? Well, let me go back to chapter 1. And then in verse 20. Then Job arose. You got to remember what just happened. He has lost all of his possessions, accumulated over a lifetime. He's lost all 10 of his children. Then Job arose and rent his robe, tore his robe, symbolic of a heart that's been ripped apart, a brokenness, shaved his head, and fell upon the ground and complained. Got angry at God. said, this isn't fair. Said, I don't deserve this. I'm one of your good guys. In fact, you said I was the best of your good guys. And you treat me this way? That's not there, is it? And worshiped. So what did he do? He wept. He wept. He grieved. All of those signs are signs of grieving. When there's loss, whatever that loss form it takes, people or possessions, it's important to grieve. You know, it's not unchristian to grieve. It's not unchristian to cry. It's not unchristian to be broken. It's not unchristian to be just kind of desperate to try to make sense out of a nonsensical situation. And too many of us either think it's unchristian, or we get angry at God, or we stuff it. That's where one of our adult children stuffed it. And then what came out was pus of life as a result of just burying it in his journey. So weep and grieve. But one of the things that Lena and I really learned pretty quickly in this, she had lost her dad and I'd lost my parents, years ago, but this was a different kind of loss, because it was tragic and it was self-induced and it was sudden. And I learned quickly that how we grieved was very different. Very different. And I didn't see that early on, and was a little insensitive in wanting Linda to grieve as I would grieve. And that created a little bit of attention, maybe a lot, that I wasn't aware of, but she managed it well. But before long, we realized that we both grieved, and we both grieved differently, and we embraced that. And that was most helpful. That's especially true if you're talking about a really close family relationship where you see each other with some regularity after some kind of a loss, whatever that is, job, work, health, loved one, is let everybody grieve, give them permission to grieve. And maybe you lead the way in grieving. Don't question how somebody else grieves. Just let them grieve. Just make sure that they grieve. Encourage everyone. We did. Encourage everyone, okay, to get professional counseling as needed over it. Preferably Christian, faith-based, but get some help outside of yourself. It's not a sign of immaturity, and it's not a sign of lack of faith, and it's not a sign of being unchristian if you need to reach out for help. I've always believed in my journey that the smartest people in the world knew when they needed help, and they were willing to go get it. So don't be afraid to get the help, but please be sure to agree. Then the next thing it says that he worshiped. How could he do that? Well, I think unlike Mrs. Job, he saw everything that he had were a gift from God, not deserved. They were part of the blessings of God, unearned, undeserved. He realized that naked he came into the world, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. No, but I came in with nothing but need, and I'm going to leave with nothing but need. The Lord gives, and the Lord takes away. It's His to do that which He wishes. But blessed be the name of the Lord. And all this, unimaginably, Job did not sin or charge God with the wrong or blame God for anything. So what does he do? Okay, he weeps and he worships, and then in verse 8, he takes his potsherd, his health is now gone, and he sits down among the ashes, just kind of to sit and to wait. And then verse 13, and they sat with him. These are some so-called friends who showed up on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great. He just, I guess, tried to absorb the moment, the loss, the pain, the agony, the suffering, the trauma, and just tried to process it. And again, he doesn't know that he's got that he's done anything wrong, which is the first place to go. Listen, when there's a terrible, traumatic, a sudden tragedy, okay, at least for me and Alinda, for sure. And I think maybe often in this case, though not usually confessed to, is that, there's a blame game to play in a hurry. In a hurry. Who's at fault? I don't remember, but when I was doing some research back, after Jeremy's death by suicide, and I was reading about it was like 50 to 75% of the marriages to end up in divorce as a result of it, and what have you. So it's a painful, as it were, process. So he just waited patiently for the Lord. Turn over to chapter 42. Just the very last part of the book. So you'll kind of get the end of the story. Everything that happens in between, these three friends, in quote, show up to comfort Job in his loss. You don't need these kind of friends. Read the story, okay? Bottom line was, I don't know if this was days, weeks, months, I don't know how long, but one after another, they basically say, Job, this is all your fault. You are to blame. You might as well go on and fess up. Okay? And it's just some painful reading. And Job again asked 75 plus questions and at times gets very close to infringing on the sovereignty of God. And then we come to chapter 42. Then Job answered the Lord. Now, God has been demonstrating his power the last 3 or 4 chapters. I don't have time to get in all of this. But God has been talking to him. And then Job, after God has clearly spoken to him, Job answers the Lord. I know that you can do all things. I know you're powerful, omnipotent. And that no purpose of yours can be thwarted, that you are sovereign. You are in control. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore, says Job, I have uttered what I did not understand. In other words, Lord, I have said some things as a result of all this loss. I have thought some things as a result of all this loss. You know all that I thought and all that I said. And looking back on some of that, I shouldn't have said it or thought it. Verse 4, hear and I will speak. I will question and you will declare to me. And I heard of thee by the hearing of the ear. But now, as a result of the tragedy, pain, trauma, heartache, and loss, now my eye sees you. And when I see you, therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. Now, down in verse 10 and following, you see the Lord restored the fortunes of Job. Not only did he restore the fortunes of Job, when he had, again, you've had all these friends, and in verses 7 through 9, Job prays for his friends. I would pray for those friends, but I would not pray what Job prayed. My prayer would be, get them, God, they're guilty. Okay? And the Lord restored the fortunes of Job when he had prayed for his friends, and I've always wondered, but what if he didn't pray? And the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. Wow. Now, does God always do that? No, but I can still wish. All right, let me wrap up. Loss is a fact. Loss comes in many forms. Job responded right. Let me offer just some important lessons, okay? And walk through those. First, even a godly life will be marked by times of loss. Even a godly life. And there was no one more godly than him. But there are no exceptions. It's coming. It's coming. And the worst is still ahead. Next, God will be there. He will be with me in the times of loss. He will be with me. In fact, God's presence is greatest when our grief and suffering is the deepest. We experience that in our journey. Next, we can grow from our losses. We can just go through them, or we can grow through them. We can just live through them, or we can learn from them. But they are coming. They are coming. We need to make the right choice so we can grow. And then last, what is lost now often becomes gain later. I want to read you a few verses that we found in our time of greatest loss that brought the most hope. First was in Isaiah chapter 43, Isaiah 43, verse 2. Isaiah 43, verse 2. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they will not overwhelm you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. For I am the Lord, your God. Chapter 45, verse 2. I will go before you and level the mountains. I will break in pieces the doors of bronze and cut asunder the bars of iron. I will give you, this was especially, I will give you the treasures out of darkness and the riches in secret places, that you may know that is I, the Lord. I, the Lord, have done this. And then in 49, these are verses that the Lord just dropped on us. Okay. Can a woman forget her sucking child? Absolutely not. If you've got a nursing infant, the mom knows that. Never forget that. And she would not have passion on the son of her womb. Even these may forget, but I will never forget you. I have graven you on the palm of my hands. Your walls are continually before me. We held on to those for dear life. Kay Witten, that I worked with for many years. Kay's still working here. On my birthday, a few months after Jeremy died, gave me this book. I have read it, reread it, marked it, read it, reread it. Linda and I, between the two of us, there's no telling how many dozens and dozens of these we have given away over the years because it helped us. And it's entitled, the book is A Grace Disguised. And a little bit of a background on it. It's written by Jerry Sitzer. Jerry was a Christian college professor. Married to Linda. They've been married about 20 years, had struggled for years having children. And then they had 4 in rapid fire. And mom was homeschooling. So they were doing a study on the Native Americans. And they took a day's trip, mom and dad and the 4 children. And Jerry's mom was visiting, and they all went to in Idaho to a Native Indian reservation for the day. They spent the whole day there ministering, and then on the way home in the evening, a drunk driver from the Indian reservation crossed into their lane, and Linda was killed. Jerry's mom was killed, and their 3rd child was killed. And Jerry was left behind with a 2-year-old, a 7-year-old, and an 8-year-old to raise those 3. And he first wrote the book about 4 years after the tragedy happened. And then he kind of did a rewrite more on the introduction and epilogue of where things were in 2004. And I've got the pages of this book marked in so many places. LSN. Lesson. And I want to, if you don't need this book, you will. And if you know anyone going through any kind of loss, it helps. And faith-based, but the struggle is very, very clear. A grace disguised. A grace disguised. Okay? Let me go back where I started. Loss is often the single most important catalyst God uses to grow us in maturity. One of my spiritual heroes, and happens to be a friend, Rick Warren. Rick's a dear friend, had a son, Matthew, that committed suicide a few years ago. Rick retired from church he started and pastored back in the 70s, and just a wonderful, wonderful Christian man, just real genuine and down to earth. And in preparing, I went back and read some of the stuff that he and Kay went through when Matthew died. And I felt like I'm going to close with this. He's talking about what's the best foundation? What's the best safeguard? Knowing that loss is coming. And let me just read. For real security, you have to build your life on something that can't be taken away. Can a job be taken from you? Yes. There's no such thing as job security. I don't care if you're the CEO of a top corporation. They get kicked out too. If you lose a job, God can turn off one faucet and turn on another with just as easy. Can you lose your health? Yes. Can you lose the person you're married to? Yes. Can you use your youthful beauty? Yes. Look around. He says, I'm fighting the middle-aged bees, baldness, bifocals, and bulges. Said you can't build your life on something that's not going to last. For ultimate security, you must build it on something that cannot be taken from you. There's only one thing that can never be taken from you, and that's your relationship to God through His Son, Jesus Christ. Jesus says, they are in my hands, and no man can pull them out. That means I put my trust in Jesus, and I say, guide me the rest of the days of my life. You're in good hands with Jesus. Amen. Here are a few questions. What's been your biggest loss in life so far? The biggest is probably still in front. How did you respond? More like Mrs. Job and the common response, or more like Job? And then what lessons have you learned from your loss to better prepare you for the bigger ones that's in front of you? Father, thank you for this problem of loss. Perhaps one of the most common in our journey, lost people in a lost place, this world. And we know that the enemy, yes, goes to and fro throughout the whole earth, looking for, I think, primarily your children. He's got the others, and trying to do with everything that he can to harass and intimidate. And I don't understand the mystery again of how he gets permission, why you grant permission, but I do know that it's through the pain and the sufferings and some of the losses of life that have been some of the most incredible opportunities in the midst of deep pain and sorrow to grow and to encourage others in the journey. So I would pray this for these that I love and those that are watching. Help us to be prepared. Help us to respond well. Help us to be encouraging to others. And help us to keep our faith firm. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen.